A dusty hillside outside Querétaro, Mexico. 7 in the morning, the 19th of June, 1867.
A tall Austrian archduke with a long blonde beard is handing gold coins to each of the 7 soldiers who are about to shoot him.
And he asks them a favor, to aim at his chest and spare his face.
So that his mother will be able to recognize him.
He tells them he forgives them. He says he hopes his blood will be the last spilled in Mexico.
The volley is ragged. He does not die immediately. A sergeant has to walk over and finish it.
Charest Maximilian Joseph of Habsburg, for 3 years, Emperor of Mexico.
A throne invented for him by a French emperor, funded by European bankers and recognized by a fraction of the people it claimed to rule.
This is the most bizarre imperial project of the 19th century.
And the strangest thing about it is the man at the center, because he was decent. He was genuinely, sincerely decent.
Which turns out not to matter at all. That's the lesson, and we'll earn it.
The plot begins not in Mexico, but in Paris, with a man who needed a triumph.
Napoleon III, who had come to power essentially by exploiting his uncle's name.
And who spent the 1850s and 60s hunting for glory that would justify the borrowed surname.
And what he wanted was a French sphere in the Americas, a Catholic Latin counterweight to the expanding Protestant English-speaking United States.
Which is not, on paper, a stupid strategic idea. It's the timing that makes it possible.
Because in the early 1860s, the United States is tearing itself apart in a civil war.
And is in no position whatsoever to enforce the Monroe Doctrine against anybody. The door is open for about 4 years.
Meanwhile, Mexico had endured 40 years of near-continuous chaos since independence.
Dozens of governments, the loss of half its territory to the United States in the War of 1846 to 1848.
Half the country, gone in 2 years, and everybody alive remembered it.
And a bitter internal conflict between conservatives, church, army, landowners, and liberals,
who wanted to strip the Catholic Church of its enormous land holdings and its political power.
The liberals won that civil war, the War of the Reform, in 1861.
And their president was Benito Juárez, who you need to understand because he is the other half of this story.
A Zapotec man from a village in Oaxaca, orphaned young, spoke no Spanish until adolescence.
Trained as a lawyer and became the most consequential figure in Mexican history.
And he is the exact opposite of Maximilian in every particular. Where Maximilian is charm and good intentions, Juárez is stone.
He inherited an empty treasury and suspended payments on the foreign debt for 2 years.
And that suspension is the pretext for everything that follows.
Britain, Spain, and France sent a joint expedition to Veracruz in late 1861, ostensibly to collect.
And the British and Spanish very quickly work out that the French intend regime change rather than debt collection.
And go home, which is, in its way, an honorable moment.
The French march inland, and they do not have an easy time of it.
The 5th of May, 1862, a smaller Mexican force under Ignacio Zaragoza defeats the French army at Puebla.
Which is the origin of Cinco de Mayo, and a genuine humiliation for what was then considered the finest army in the world.
France sends 30,000 more men, takes Puebla the following year, occupies Mexico City in June 1863.
And Juárez does not surrender.
He loads the Republican government into black carriages and moves north, and keeps the constitutional presidency alive on the road.
The archive of the Republic of Mexico, in a carriage, moving between desert towns, for 4 years.
And that matters enormously, because it means there is always a legitimate government, just somewhere else.
Now Napoleon needs a monarch to install, and Mexican conservative exiles in Europe have a candidate ready.
Maximilian, 31 years old, the younger brother of Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria.
Which meant in practice that he was never going to inherit anything.
He'd been a competent commander-in-chief of the Austrian Navy and a reformist viceroy of Lombardy, Venetia.
Where he was recalled for being too liberal for Vienna's taste, which tells you something real about him.
Intelligent, curious, a serious amateur botanist, and by every account personally kind.
and completely, catastrophically unsuited to what he was about to accept.
His wife Charlotte of Belgium, Carlota in Mexico, was ambitious and pushed hard for the crown.
And he had a scruple, and it is the single most revealing thing about him.
He said he would only accept if the Mexican people actually wanted him.
So a plebiscite was arranged in the areas under French military occupation.
Conducted by the army that had just conquered them, among people who had watched their towns shelled, and it produced an overwhelming yes.
It was obviously worthless. A child could see it was worthless.
And he chose to believe it. He signed away his Austrian succession rights and sailed in 1864.
And that's the moment, isn't it? Not the firing squad, the moment he decided to believe a piece of paper he knew was a lie because he wanted the throne it came with.
And then he arrives and immediately baffles everybody.
Because the conservatives and the church had brought him over specifically to reverse the liberal reforms and restore the church's confiscated lands.
And Maximilian refuses.
He upholds the land seizures, maintains religious tolerance, and tells the papal nuncio to his face that the reforms will stand.
And then he goes further, and this is the genuinely astonishing part of his reign.
He abolished child labor, limited the working day,
canceled the debts of laborers over 10 pesos, which is the debt peonage system that kept rural workers effectively bound to estates,
banned corporal punishment on the haciendas, and restored communal land rights to indigenous villages.
He learned Spanish, wore Mexican dress, studied Nahuatl,
ordered the construction of a grand boulevard in Mexico City that is still there and is still called the Paseo de la Reforma.
So on paper, he's a better liberal than half the liberals.
And the result is that he loses his own coalition without gaining his enemies.
The conservatives who imported him feel betrayed. They'd paid for a restoration and got a reformer.
And the liberals are entirely unmoved because he is still a foreign prince on a throne carried in by a foreign army, and Juarez is still president.
Maximilian actually wrote to Juarez offering him a post in his government.
And Juarez replied, and the reply is one of the great documents of the 19th century.
He observes that it is given to men to attack the rights of others, seize their property, and pretend that providence justifies it.
And that history will judge, not him, history.
And Maximilian's actual authority never extended much beyond the reach of French bayonets.
Republican guerrillas controlled the countryside. He held cities and the roads between them on a good day.
And then, in October 1865, he does the one thoroughly ruthless thing of his reign.
Under French pressure and believing, wrongly, that Juarez had fled the country, he signs the Black Decree,
ordering that armed Republicans be treated as bandits and executed within 24 hours of capture, no trial.
Thousands died under it. Men shot at roadsides the day after they were taken because a decent man in an impossible position signed a document to make a problem go away.
And it is the exact document that will later be used to justify killing him.
Then the money and the soldiers run out at the same time.
The empire was financially absurd from the very first day.
Maximilian had signed the Convention of Miramar, agreeing that Mexico would pay for the French expedition that conquered it.
In the anger, read that again. The invaded country pays the invoice for its own invasion, on top of the debt whose non-payment triggered the invasion.
Loans were raised in Europe at punishing terms, and most of the proceeds went straight back out to service earlier obligations.
And the court was expensive. He spent heavily restoring Chapultepec Castle. There was a book of protocol for a court that barely existed.
And then in April 1865, the American Civil War ends.
And that is the end of the whole project, right there, 2 years before anybody dies.
Washington had never recognized the Mexican Empire, and now it had a large veteran army and a completely free hand.
It began supplying the Republicans, moved troops to the Rio Grande, made its position on the Monroe Doctrine unmistakable.
And simultaneously, Prussia was rising in Europe.
Bismarck had defeated Denmark and was preparing to fight Austria. France's eastern border was suddenly the only thing that mattered in Paris.
So Napoleon III made the only rational calculation available to him and broke his word.
In early 1866, he announces the withdrawal of French troops from Mexico.
And Carlota sails to Europe to plead for him.
With Napoleon, who refused to see her for more than a few minutes, and then with the Pope in Rome.
And she suffered a severe mental collapse during that journey, convinced she was being poisoned, refusing to eat anything not prepared in front of her.
She reportedly spent a night in the Vatican because she would not leave. She said it was the only place she was safe.
She spent the remaining 60 years of her life in seclusion in Belgium, and she never learned what happened to her husband.
60 years. She died in 1927.
The last French troops left in March 1867, and Maximilian was urged to leave with them.
And he refused. He said a Habsburg does not run.
It was a point of honor, and it was fatal. And I think he knew both of those things.
With around 8,000 mostly Mexican conservative troops, he moved north to Querétaro and was besieged there.
After 10 weeks, an officer named Miguel Lopez let the Republicans through the lines.
Whether that was a bribe, a betrayal, or a negotiated arrangement to end the siege has been argued about for 150 years.
Maximilian was captured in May 1867.
And tried by court-martial under a Mexican law of 1862 prescribing death for armed intervention against the Republic.
And his own black decree left no room at all for an appeal to mercy. He had abolished that argument himself.
Petitions for clemency arrived from Victor Hugo, from Garibaldi, from most of the crowned heads of Europe.
And Juarez refused every one of them.
And his reasoning was cold and completely consistent.
The point was not revenge. The point was to make it permanently clear that no European power should ever again believe it could install a monarch in the Americas.
And expect the experiment to end with a comfortable exile and a pension.
He was shot on the Hill of Bells with 2 Mexican generals, Miramon and Mejia. He was 34.
Edouard Manet painted the execution repeatedly.
And the French government banned the images from exhibition because in the paintings, the firing squad is dressed unmistakably like French soldiers.
Everyone could see who had actually put him in front of that wall, and Paris did not want it hanging on a gallery wall.
Juarez restored the Republic and was re-elected.
And Napoleon III lost his own throne 3 years later, after Prussia destroyed his army at Sedan.
So, the verdict. And it's the one I find hardest to argue with in the whole series.
Maximilian was not a tyrant. By the standards of his class and century, he was a liberal and a reformer.
Who genuinely wanted to be a good ruler for people he had never met.
And that was precisely the problem. He accepted a crown handed to him by an occupying army on the strength of a rigged vote.
And no amount of decent policy afterwards could change what he was.
Legitimacy is not something a foreign power can give you.
It is only ever loaned by the governed, and Mexico had already lent it to somebody else.
This was History But Better Podcast, Episode 18.